The accusations are explosive that in the 1970s and 80s, senior Labour Party figures were involved with an organisation that supported paedophilia. The Daily Mail's campaign has been noisy and aggressive and until tonight unanswered. The questions: how could the deputy leader of the Labour Party, her husband and another senior Labour figure have any dealings at any time with an organisation committed to the sexual exploitation of children? How did the pressure group they worked for at the time ally itself with a campaign to reduce the age of consent to 10? Here's Laura Koonsberg with the story so far.
Over recent days, the Daily Mail has splashed its front pages with allegations about the Labour deputy leader, her husband, Shadow Minister Jack Dromey, and the former Labour Health Secretary Patricia Hewitt. All three worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties in the 1970s and 80s. The Mail says the council, now known as the human rights organisation Liberty, was closely linked to the Paedophile Information Exchange, a group which campaigned for paedophiles' rights. It's claimed it even argued to lower the age of consent to 10. Ms Harman became the legal officer at the NCCL in 1978, and her name appears on documents submitted to the Home Office that argued that pictures of naked children should not be banned as indecent unless it could be proved that the child had been harmed. But today, Ms Harman's boss, the Labour leader, Ed Miliband, came to her defence.
Harriet Harman is somebody of huge decency and integrity. I've known her for 20 years. I don't set any store by these allegations. I know she has a long and proud record of being on the right side of all of these issues. And frankly, that is absolutely clear.
But now, after days of demands from the Mail and other newspapers for Hewitt, Dromey and Harman to provide answers, the Labour deputy leader has decided to break her silence.
So our chief correspondent spoke exclusively to Harriet Harman earlier this evening.
Harriet Harman, are you speaking out now because the Daily Mail has made it impossible for you to keep quiet?
Yes, that is the case. I mean, they've made these allegations before and they're so outlandish and so far from the truth that in the past I've thought, don't dignify them with a response. You know, people won't believe them, they'll just go away. And I thought the same this time, but they've put it on their front page 3 times and they're whipping up such an ugly insinuation that I felt it was really important to respond to them.
But you were the legal officer for several years at the National Council for Civil Liberties, which was affiliated to the Paedophile Information Exchange. Were you aware of the affiliation?
Basically, NCCL was an organisation which had something like 6,000 members and 1,000 affiliates, and anybody could join the NCCL simply by paying a fee. When I was there as NCCL legal officer, there was nothing that, far from it, that I put forward that supported sexual abuse of children.
But why was it acceptable even to have an affiliation? They didn't try to hide what they were. The title of the group was the Paedophile Information Exchange. Why was it okay for them even to have any link with the group you worked for?
Well, NCCL was an organisation where any organisation could pay their affiliation and join it. And that's the way it was. It didn't have an expulsions policy. Any individual who wanted to pay their money to join NCCL could, and any organisation could join and affiliate to it.
An affiliation is an official link. And when you were the legal officer at the National Council for Civil Liberties, did you do anything to suggest that link should be broken? Did you do anything to try to push them away from your organisation?
They'd already been pushed away.
Well, they were still members till 1983.
Well, they'd already been pushed away in 1976 and were not having, the policy was set by the broad membership of NCCL at their annual general meetings.
But in terms of that affiliation, did you have anxiety about that at the time?
Well, the anxiety and the controversy had happened before I was there.
But did you not have anxiety about the continuing affiliation while you were there? You were there for 4 years, you were there with one of your close friends and your husband. Did none of you discuss anxieties about having them as a group linked, however distantly, to the work that you were trying to do?
But they were not linked to the work that we were doing.
But you see, at the time when you were the legal officer there, You wrote in a briefing paper to MPs, and we have it here, that prosecutions in relation to child protection and photography should only proceed if you can prove that children were actually harmed. Now, making that argument while the National Council was linked to the Paedophile Information Exchange, can you see why people might raise an eyebrow about that argument being made while there was an official link to an overt group of paedophiles?
But basically, if you look at that briefing paper, it actually welcomes the Protection of Children Bill, which for the first time was going to introduce a criminal law which said photography of children, which was going to be used for pornography, which was sexually abusive of children, was for the first time going to be a criminal offence. We also argued that we wanted it to have clear definitions.
Was the affiliation between the two groups a mistake?
There wasn't an affiliation between the two groups. You're making it sound as if there was somehow a mutuality. There wasn't.
But technically, there was an affiliation.
No,
they paid their membership to the NCCL, and they were therefore part of the wider group. Was that a mistake?
They paid their money to NCCL, and at the time, well, NCCL takes money from any organisation which was a lawful organisation and any individual.
But was it a mistake to have that affiliation?
Well, I think what was right was to actually dispel them from the conference and make sure that their views were never taken forward by NCCL, and that's what the big clash was.
It's a very simple question. Yes or no, was it a mistake to allow an overt group who were publicly campaigning for paedophiles to be affiliated, which is the term they used, to the National Council for Civil Liberties when you were the legal officer?
Well, I think on the basis that it has created somehow a sense that NCCL's work was therefore tainted by them, yes, obviously that is a very unfortunate inference to happen, but it is not the case that my work when I was at NCCL was influenced by PI, was apologising for paedophilia or colluding with paedophilia. That is an unfair inference and it's a smear.
Why won't you just say whether or not clearly it was a mistake for there to be any affiliation? You could have sent back their membership fees. You could have thrown them out.
You know, it was just not the sort of organisation which actually people applied to and were then vetted, you know, are you able to give your donation? More than 1,000 organisations, you know,
but this was a notorious group that you were well aware of. Why won't you, with the benefit of decades of hindsight, just say, yes, it was a mistake for there to be any connection at all?
Because they were challenged and they were pushed aside from their views having any influence on NCCL. Your implication
so it was okay for them to carry on having...
Your implication is that somehow by giving them money, NCCL was influenced. It wasn't. You know, I don't even know how much they gave, possibly even £10 a year. I don't even know. But
you
the policy was set by the NCCL.
You were happy for your employer at the time. You were happy that your employer for 4 years took membership money from a group that was overtly campaigning for the rights of paedophiles. That wasn't a mistake. That's what you're saying.
Well, I was content with the fact, in the knowledge, that nothing that I did supported paedophilia in any way, shape or form.
But you're happy for the National Council on Civil Liberties to have taken money from a paedophile group? That
I wasn't
a
even
mistake.
happy that the group existed. You know, they shouldn't have existed. They were obviously, you know, a front for very bad people who I think many of them were then prosecuted.
Is this the beginning of another big battle between the Labour Party and the Daily Mail? Your
No.
party leaders already had a huge battle with them.
This is not a battle I'm seeking. This is the Daily Mail aggressively trying to completely reshape the facts of a situation 30 years ago. It is ironic that they're accusing me of supporting indecency in relation to children when they themselves are not above producing photographs of very young girls, titivating photographs in bikinis. So, you know, I stand by what I was doing at NCCL and I stand by what I've done all the way through.
Are you accusing the Daily Mail of printing indecent images? Sounds very much like you are making that accusation.
Well, I think if there's anybody who has over the years supported indecency, it is much more the Daily Mail than it is me, and that's the frank truth of it.
Well, Laura joins us now. Has this explanation made things Better or worse?
Well, I think it's certainly not made the problem go away, not least because, as you heard there, time and again, we asked Harriet Harman whether it was a mistake to have this affiliation, however close or distant, with the Paedophile Information Exchange, and she just refused to say it. And I think those people who've been following this story closely, not least the Daily Mail, frankly, will be really wound up by that. And also, at the end of the interview, she then hit back at the newspaper, accusing them of somehow printing the kinds of things that they themselves might consider indecent. So I think that is going to be, frankly, like the red rag to a bull for the Daily Mail.
Facsimile of the front page
Here's tomorrow's front page of the Mail, but still they won't say sorry. And I think, given the vociferousness of the campaign so far, the idea that this will somehow be wrapped up is pretty unlikely.
What sort of state was she in?
I think she had very clearly thought about how she was going to present her case. You see, they've gone back over the evidence, the documents, some of them the Mail has published. She's clearly very familiar with them. But the Daily Mail has told us tonight, as far as they are concerned, today's statements from Ms Harman, and indeed her husband, Jack Droby, have, as they described it, been full of peasantry and obfuscation. They say it's the paper's job to ask controversial questions. But I think there's also a bit of a sense of exasperation, because some of these allegations have been made before. Ms Harman has never spoken out publicly like this, and I think, in a sense, she's at the end of her tether, but I don't think this is the end of the rag.
Laura, thank you. The accusations are explosive that in the 1970s and 80s, senior Labour Party figures were involved with an organisation that supported paedophilia. The Daily Mail's campaign has been noisy and aggressive and, until tonight, unanswered. The questions: how could the deputy leader of the Labour Party, her husband and another senior Labour figure...
Huge decency and integrity. I've known her for 20 years. I don't set any store by these allegations. I know she has a long and proud record of being on the right side of all of these issues. And frankly, that is absolutely clear.
But now, after days of demands from the Mail and other newspapers for Hewitt, Dromy and Harman to provide answers, the Labour deputy leader has decided to break her silence, sent to 10. Ms Harman became the legal officer at the NCCL in 1978, and her name appears on documents submitted to the Home Office that argued that pictures of naked children should not be banned as indecent unless it could be proved that the child had been harmed. But today, Ms Harman's boss, the Labour leader, Ed Miliband, came to her defence.
Harriet Harman is somebody of...
Shadow Minister Jack Dromy and the former Labour Health Secretary Patricia Hewitt. All three worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties in the 1970s and 80s. The Mail says the council, now known as the human rights organisation Liberty, was closely linked to the Paedophile Information Exchange, a group which campaigned for paedophiles' rights. It's claimed it even argued to lower the age of consent.
Have any dealings at any time with an organisation committed to the sexual exploitation of children? How did the pressure group they worked for at the time ally itself with a campaign to reduce the age of consent to 10? Here's Laura Koonsberg with the story so far.
Over recent days, the Daily Mail has splashed its front pages with allegations about the Labour deputy leader, her husband,